Hello. So you want to speedrun Quest for Glory 5. Let me see if I can help with that. So first, you'll want to pick up the game on either Steam or GOG. It's part of the Quest for Glory collection. If you want to either record your gameplay or you want to stream your game, which you probably do if you're speedrunning, you'll need to use a program called DxWnd. The reason is because the game forces itself to run in full screen mode, and it is really challenging to capture it while it is running like that. So DxWnd is a program that will let you run the game in windowed mode. The latest version of DxWnd doesn't actually work with the game, I found. So I have a link in the description to this particular resource on speedrun.com. You can click this link to grab one of the older versions of DxWnd, so make sure you use that. Once you have DxWnd running, you can right-click in the window and choose Import, and then you can choose the DxW file that is down here at the bottom of this page. Import that in, and then you can right-click on the icon and click Modify, and this is where you're going to want to update the path to your executable. I have these paths here that you can use depending on whether you're using the Steam or the GOG version of the game. If you have the game installed somewhere else, you can put that path in right here. And by default, I have the window size set to 1280 by 960. That's my preferred window size. If that's too big or too small for you, here I have a list of 4:3 aspect ratio resolutions. You can pick whichever one you prefer. Then go ahead and double-click on the icon to make sure that the game launches okay. Assuming that it does, you can then go ahead and just click File and Save to save your configuration. A couple things to note about running the game in DxWnd. The first is that the mouse is locked to the window. I think this is generally a good thing because it means you can't accidentally move the mouse outside the window and it loses focus and then things get all messy. But as a result of that, it means that you'll need to Alt-Tab out of the game in order to get your mouse back if you need to click somewhere else. Which leads to the second issue, which is that while you're Alt-Tabbed out, the game doesn't continue to update in the background. If you want the game to continue updating, you can check this box, Do Not Notify on Task Switch, and that will cause the game to continue to run while the window does not have focus. You won't get audio, but the game will continue to run. All right, let's hop into the game, and I just want to go over some general tips that you'll want to keep in mind when speedrunning this game, just basic tips about controlling your character, performing actions, that kind of thing, because it's a bit of a weird and janky sort of old game from the 90s. We're going to just play as a wizard here. The first thing you want to keep in mind is that in order to skip dialogue, you just hold spacebar, and you'll want to know in advance before dialogue is going to happen, because if I hold spacebar now, it takes a second before it skips dialogue very quickly. So if you know in advance that dialogue is going to happen, you'll want to have the spacebar held down early, so that by the time the dialogue happens, it just immediately breezes through all of it. But let's hop into Silmaria. And the first thing you'll want to do is press Escape and then go to the Controls menu. You're going to want to change your difficulty down to Easy. Detail I don't think matters. You can set that to whatever you want, same thing with volume. Make sure your default movement is set to Run, and then make sure Show Compass is set to Yes. The compass is going to be important later when I talk about time management. Next, you'll want to set your key bindings. The defaults look like this. A lot of these you don't need to worry about, but the most important ones I think are setting forward, backward, turn left and turn right. This will let you do keyboard controls. We'll go over keyboard movement later. I think you'll probably also want to have the inventory, spells, and character screens set somewhere convenient for you. And then I also recommend clearing out the bindings for change screen size and toggle compass. You don't want to hit those keys by accident, because it can be pretty disorienting when it happens. If you're curious, these are the key bindings I use. They're not the best, but it puts everything within easy reach of my left hand, because this is still a very mouse-oriented game, and so your right hand is going to be on the mouse for most of it, so anything to put key bindings within easy reach of your left hand I think is going to be helpful. So Quest for Glory 5 comes from a lineage of adventure games, so that means by default it is click to move. You click wherever you want, and your hero is going to pathfind to wherever it is that you want it to go. And that leads to the first issue, which is that because of the camera angle, it's possible for objects in the foreground to eat your clicks. So if I'm just trying to run through this area, clicking, you'll see my hero just randomly decides to run toward the foreground because I clicked on the leaves of that plant. So in those situations, what you'll either want to do is switch to keyboard controls, which I'll go over in a moment, or just find the gaps between the foreground objects, and that'll make it a little bit easier for your hero to path where he needs to go. Now, it is convenient that the game auto-pathfinds to where you clicked, but here, I'm going to click down here at the base of these stairs, and the game is going to make an executive decision on exactly how my hero is going to go there. So here you can see as I reach the base of the stairs, I'm not clicking anything. This is the path the game decided was the best path to go. Obviously not great. I think what's going on is the game stops when it finds a path, but it might not be the best path. So in any situation where your hero needs to run a long distance to get to where you click, make sure you just keep clicking every now and then, because every time you click, the game is going to update the path that your hero is going to take, and it just makes it less likely that he's going to take a circuitous path to your destination. There are still some situations like the docks over here where I don't think running around the that definitely wasn't the best way to get to wherever I wanted to click. So be mindful of that. You'll find those situations where pathing is awkward. You'll just have to click around them. Now, as I mentioned, there are keyboard controls for the game, but they are also not intuitive if you're not familiar with tank controls. Because I have them set to WASD right now, but W doesn't move up on the screen. It moves your character forward relative to his current orientation. And similarly, S moves backward. A and D don't strafe. They cause your character to rotate left and right. You may have seen the mapping screen does have strafe buttons. They are slow and awkward to use, and I don't recommend using them. Because it's very slow. So if you're not comfortable with tank controls, you can get by most of the run just by clicking to move, and that's fine. There are just some situations where keyboard controls help a lot, and a couple where it's just substantially more difficult to click where you want to go. It's just a lot easier to use the keyboard, especially if you ever want to walk backwards, which is valuable for when you're casting certain spells, which I will go over later. So I do recommend getting used to keyboard controls and just get comfortable switching between them. So click here, switch to running forward if you want to, and then switch back to clicking to move. It takes a bit of practice, but I do recommend getting comfortable with that. All right, next we're going to go over items and spells. You can open your inventory by clicking this button on the bottom right. But again, I do recommend using a keyboard shortcut to do so. This also gives you direct access to the spells menu as well. So I can just press, for me, I have it down to Z, and that just immediately opens my spells, and I can switch between them very easily. Now you can't use an item or a spell unless it's in your hotbar. When you have either the spells or the inventory screen open, you can click and drag to rearrange stuff, you can overlap things, you can click and drag off of the bar to remove something from your hotbar, and of course you can click and drag to move something onto your hotbar. And you're going to be doing that throughout the run just because you can only hold up to 9 slots on your hotbar. Now, to use an item or to cast a spell, you have a few choices. You can, of course, just press the keyboard shortcut to cast the spell or to use the item. You can also click on the thing if you need to target it on a specific thing. Click on it and then click wherever it is that you want to cast the spell or use the item on. If you have something selected, you can right-click to deselect that spell or item. And then you can also double-click on it and then click the Use button that's on the bottom left over here, and that will use it as well. That one doesn't come up as often, but it does come up in a couple occasions, so it's useful to know about that. One thing about right-clicking to cancel is that if you right-click while you have nothing selected, it'll switch your hand icon to an eye. If that ever happens to you, you can just right-click again and it'll switch back to the hand. That'll also happen if you accidentally click this hand over here, by the way. Now, there are a couple oddities about using items that are worth pointing out. The first is that the Mystic Magnet is the only item you cannot use by hitting its keyboard shortcut. The only way to use it is either to click the magnet on yourself, or you can double click on it and then click the Use button. Either one of those will work, but the keyboard shortcut will not. The second oddity is the fact that if I click on, say for example, the painting, I want to show it to Gnome Anne. If I click her and then I switch to a different item,
you here to complain about your being short-cheated?
I show her the sheets instead of the painting because I switched what it was before I actually got there. Not every interaction works this way. So for example, if I click the key on the door and then switch to the painting, in this situation, it actually uses the key. Most of the time, if you switch to a different item before the interaction completes, it'll use the second item, not the first one. So most of the time, if you're doing an interaction, make sure you complete the interaction before you change which item you have selected. Now I'm going to quickly go over some of the more commonly used spells. The first one is the Frostbite spell. Frostbite is the most powerful spell in the game, probably more powerful than the developers intended just because computers are more powerful these days. I don't think they expected the game would be able to run at 60 frames per second. So I'm just going to show you how powerful it is, and so I'm just going to cast Frostbite on this enemy, and just see how quickly it just rips through his health bar. It is such a powerful spell. Now, once you've cast the Frostbite, you can just keep moving, so I can just click the Frostbite there, right-click to cancel it, and then immediately start running somewhere else. And if I can face another enemy before the spell expires, I can take out multiple enemies in a single Frostbite. Let me try to do that here. So finish that guy off, and then finish that one off. So Frostbite is a very powerful spell. It's also possible to stack multiple Frostbites on top of each other. So if I just hold down 3, I've got 5 Frostbites on top of each other right now. So that's worth keeping in mind. It usually doesn't take that many Frostbites to kill an enemy. But if you're dealing with an enemy that has a lot of hit points, then more than one Frostbite might be worth it. Another thing about Frostbite is that if you cast it with the keyboard shortcut, it's just going to cast it in front of you. But if you cast it by clicking, then it's going to orient the cone in whatever direction that you click. And again, this might be useful for whatever reason. Most of the time, you're just going to want to cast the Frostbite directly in front of you. One additional nuance about the Frostbite spell is that if you're standing too close to the enemy that you're targeting, it's not going to do as much damage. And that's because the enemy is occupying a smaller area of the cone. And so because of that smaller overlap, it's dealing less damage. And so if you're in a situation where you're too close to the enemy that you're frostbiting, it's helpful to cast it and then step backwards. Because when you're stepping backwards, you're letting a bigger area of the cone overlap with the enemy. It also allows you to kind of turn left and right to adjust which way that the cone is oriented, just to make sure that you're dealing as much damage as possible. This is especially important if you're in a part of the game where you're restricted on how much mana you have, and especially if you choose not to take any mana pills with you. Making sure every frostbite counts is really important. The second spell I want to go over is the Calm spell. It is an extremely powerful spell. The Calm spell makes it so that any enemies that are visible on screen just stand there and do nothing for the duration of the spell. And this is important because there are certain interactions in the game, like opening chests or opening doors, that the game will not let you do if an enemy is aggroed on you. So you can cast Calm the enemies, and then you can just ignore them and proceed with whatever it is that you want to do. We can use this to avoid most of the combat throughout the game, actually. But there's a downside. The Calm spell only affects enemies that are visible on screen. So here, I cast Calm, and I calm those two enemies on the right. The enemies that I could not see that were over here are not calm. They're still aggroed on me. But because I already have a Calm spell active, I can't cast another one. I have to wait until the first one expires before I can cast another Calm and then calm these enemies. So be mindful of that. If there's an interaction you need to do, and there are enemies in the room, make sure you see all the enemies before you cast Calm. The other spells that are worth mentioning, I'll just go over them quickly. Open just lets you open doors and chests from a distance. Trigger is used in a couple situations where you need to set off a trap. Force Bolt and Flame Dart are projectile spells. Force Bolt bounces off of walls. It's critical for the Skyrunner glitch, which I will go over in another video. But we use it in one specific instance to hit a lever from the distance. And Flame Dart is used in the Hydra boss fight to burn the stumps to prevent the heads from growing back. The Levitate spell is used in a couple situations. It only lets you go up or down. You can't use it to go horizontally unless, again, you use the Skyrunner glitch, which I will cover later. And then finally, there's the Resistance spell. It's not required, but there are a couple situations where an enemy is going to cast an elemental spell on you, and Resistance reduces that damage to nearly 0. This is really important for some spells that enemies cast that are like Frostbite. They will rip through your health bar very quickly, and Resistance can be used to make those areas a lot safer. Finally, there's time of day management. So as you can see, the game has a time of day system, and certain things are only available within certain time spans of the day. So for example, the market is only open from 6:30 a.m. to 6 o'clock p.m. And so if I were to make it after 6 o'clock, and then I leave and come back, all the shops are going to be closed. If you ever find yourself in this situation in the middle of a run and you forgot that the shops are going to be closed, but you have shopping to do, you have a few choices. The first choice is that if it is late enough in the evening and you're in the middle of turning in a right MacGuffin at the Hall of Kings to end a rite, if it's late enough, when you go in, it'll automatically advance time to the next morning. So after you complete the rite, then you can come back to the market and do whatever shopping it was that you missed out on. Failing that, your other option is not great. You open up the character screen, click rest, and click 1 hour, and you just keep doing this until it's after 6:30 the following morning. It's a lot of clicking, it's annoying, it's embarrassing when it happens, but this is something that you can do to salvage a run if you forgot. So after that, you can just leave the market and come back, and now the shops are open. But the fastest way to advance time is to magnet back to your in-room, which in No Major Skips you're going to be doing a lot anyway, open the character screen, and sleep. Sleep causes 8 hours to advance instantly, and so it's a very convenient way to, like if you're one day early and you need something to happen on the next day, just sleep 3 times, and then you're ready to go. Now, if you click rest and the sleep button isn't there, then either you're in an area where you're not allowed to sleep, or you're too hungry. So if you're in your in-room and you can't sleep, then you can just eat food, eat until it says you're not hungry anymore, then you'll get access to the sleep button again. But that's about it as far as general tips go. I'll wrap up just by kind of giving a brief summary of kind of what the point of the game is. You're in the kingdom of Silmaria, and the previous king has been assassinated, and Silmaria is hosting the Rights of Rulership, which is a competition to find the next king of Silmaria, and our hero has decided to participate as kind of an excuse to gain information and investigate and find the assassin of the king and bring them to justice, and along the way maybe become king of Silmaria ourselves. If you're interested in that category, we go through all 7 rights of rulership in the No Major Skips category. You can find a link to that video in the description below. But otherwise, let me know if you have any questions about speedrunning this game in the comments. I am a fountain of information, and happy speedrunning. Thanks.